Welcome back, everyone. This is Austin Reville on our From the Vault series, featuring unique and historical firearms that come through our shop right here in New Prague, Minnesota. And I got a really cool one for you today. We have the Han Solo gun, the C96 Bolo Mauser pistol. Now, this particular pistol here is not the first semi-automatic pistol ever created. In fact, I am going to read for you the first one because I struggle with the pronunciation, and it was the Salvador Dormus, invented in 1892 by Schönberger Lumens. I do apologize if I am mispronouncing that, but that was the first semi-automatic pistol ever invented in 1892. So if we back up, where does semi-automatic stuff come from? Hiram Maxim, inventor of the Maxim machine gun, did the self-loading machine gun in 1883. That is where he first started producing and inventing these automatic machine gun as we would know it today. And people quickly tried to apply that same principle to pistols and rifles and shotguns. And we would see various attempts of that throughout history. Now, despite the fact that this is not the first semi-automatic pistol, this is pretty much the first successful semi-automatic pistol. And I don't mean it's successful in terms of operation. The other ones operated very fine. There was the C93 that came before this. It was the first commercially accepted semi-automatic pistol. So these will look very familiar. You'll see them in lots of movies, lots of video games. Han Solo's gun from the original Star Wars is a C96 Bolo that they have glued stuff to, put an optic on to make it look very futuristic. These were invented in 1896, excuse me there, and were produced all the way up through the 1930s by the Mauser Company. Now, there are a bunch of knockoffs. The Chinese would make some knockoffs, as would the Russians. So they weren't exclusively produced by Mauser. They were unlicensed copies, we should say. They just ripped them off. There's some various changes that were made to this over time. There were also some fully automatic versions of this made with the Red 9. For instance. Now, this particular pistol was made between 1916 and 1921. That was the closest I could get the serial number dates down to. During the First World War, a lot of that stuff is either missing or not well kept up with. These were top-loading, stripper-clipped fed firearms. So they, modern handgun has a detachable magazine that you would remove and put a new one in to load cartridges into your gun. That was not what this was. This, they would lock open upon empty. You would put your stripper clip right here, and you would feed your cartridges, 10 rounds, down into the internal box magazine. It's very Mauser-ish in design, in terms of you have to push down the internal feed ramp in order for the bolt to close. It is a locking bolt design. If you can see there, when I push it, the upper part moves to unlock the bolt as the firearm reciprocates, allowing the bolt to unlock and eject the cartridge as it opens. It is a hammered firearm, as you can see. It is an external hammer. It does feature a safety right here. It's got a safety that would work just like a modern external safety would. One of the unique things about this is your holster was actually wooden, or there were several versions of them where there was a wooden holster, so the gun would go inside it, and then you could hook the holster into the back strap right here, which would add a stock to this particular handgun. This was done to give it greater accuracy and range, though obviously you still are with the barrel length that you have, but you could turn this into a rifle. This was done for like artillery troops during World War I to allow them to have a rifle-ish firearm if they were being attacked on the rearward section of the battlefield. So these pistols were very, very popular when they came out. It does feature your loop right here that you would put your leather strap through that would go over your wrist, so if you dropped it, it would hang. You gotta think back here in 1896, 1800s, even 1900s, even World War I, horseback is still a thing, especially in warfare. It's very bumpy. You might drop your gun. Instead of having it fall on the ground, kind of like in the movies, you would loop it on your wrist, so that way it would just dangle there. You could easily grab it and not lose it. These pistols were particularly liked by the British, ironically. So Paul Mauser, who invented this in 1896, German guy. Obviously, we know him for the Mauser action and the famous Mausers, World War I, World War II, that would be copied by the U.S. and the Japanese and pretty much everyone. And the Mauser action is still in use today. So a very effective invention that he would invent. He does have some kind of a Mauser action in this particular gun as well. In terms of the locking open and having to press the feed ramp for your internal magazine in order to close the bolt. The British would very much like these. In terms of, I guess, their officers. So we got to think about warfare back then. So handguns are very much an officer's thing. Your average grunt did not have a handgun. They were issued one rifle. They would just have their rifle. This idea of a sidearm was very much a upper crust kind. You got to think of the British military, very class system. You were a gentleman. Gentlemen had pistols, not your average person. Now, the gentlemen also did not carry rifles. They only carried handguns. So this secondary weapon concept is something that we would see kind of start to infiltrate in World War II and really come into full fruition by Korea, Vietnam. So this is very early and again, kind of an officer's model. So they would actually buy the officers at their own expense just to have these. They consider them such a superior weapon system to the revolvers that they were being issued. And in terms of feeding the stripper clip into the gun and reloading, this was a lot faster, actually. I know today it looks very cumbersome, but compared to the guns at the time, this was incredibly fast. So this gave you a great advantage. Now, the fully automatic versions of these guns, they didn't feature an extended magazine or anything like that. 10 rounds, just 10 internal rounds. So you could make the argument that was a bit unhelpful, maybe. Not something that was particularly a good move for this particular weapon design. You got to realize that in the early 1900s, submachine guns weren't a thing. That really wouldn't be a thing until World War II. There were some prototypes. I know Battlefield 1, the World War I version of Battlefield, kind of had you to believe that there was a bunch of submachine guns available in World War I. This is not true. There were some prototypes. Maybe a couple of those prototypes made it to the battlefield, but broadly speaking, submachine guns were a post-World War I interwar period between World War I and World War II, and eventually a World War II thing. You would see the Thompson submachine gun come out in 1921, and that would be kind of the big introduction into this whole sub-gun idea. This was a machine pistol. This is a handgun, so it would be a machine pistol, but it was kind of that cheat. If you didn't want a full machine gun, which were very heavy, very cumbersome, and took multiple people to operate in World War I, you could have it in a smaller gun. That's kind of was the concept. Now, how effective was that? Not very, truthfully. That's why you don't see a ton of them. But the Bolo itself would serve all the way through World War II. You would see this pop up a lot in World War II. It was chambered in 7.63 by 25 Mauser. Now you would say, well, that sounds awfully close to 7.62 by 25, because it is. 7.62 by 25 Tokarev, which would be an improvement on the 7.63 cartridge for this gun by the Russians and the Soviets leading into World War II, obviously with their Tokarev pistol, and of course several of their machine gun variants, the PPSH-41, PPS-43, so on and so forth. It was a higher powered cartridge, so you cannot use those Tokarev cartridges in this gun. These are kind of really a product of their time in terms of their manufacturing. You'll see, everything serialized. The way everything fits together is very non-assembly line. It was, for the most part, hand-fitted, though you can interchange parts because this is not serial numbers matching. It is possible. The rifling in this one is a bit rough, as expected. A lot of these were rechambered in 9mm after the war, just so you could actually shoot them, because the cartridge itself is a bit tough to find. I do actually, or I should say, I have had the pleasure of shooting that cartridge. It's a bit underpowered compared to, say, the Tokarev cartridge, but for a handgun, it gave you great advantage compared to your opponents. These are very, very cool guns. You can see it does have your typical rear sight post that featured the elevation design, very similar to, you know, your Mausers and bolt actions of the time. So it's kind of a hybrid where they took the concepts from the bolts of the era and kind of shrunk them down and fit them into a handgun. You know, these guns were kind of forgotten at the time, and then of course Star Wars comes out in 1977, where they use one of these as Han Solo's guns. And unfortunately, I have seen real versions of this that people have Han Solo'd it, for lack of a better word, where they added all the parts just like George Lucas in his film did, and ruins the historical value of them, unfortunately. These guns were very, very cool for their era, and it's very awesome to see them come through our shop. We do hope you come and check us out, because again, we get guns like this and the ones we've shown you on previous videos through all the time. You just never know what's going to come walking through that door. If you've really enjoyed this, please like, comment, and subscribe. We look forward to bringing you more next week. Until next time.